And now, please welcome, you know what to do, Mr. Mickey Dolenz! Hey, it is so nice to have you back. Excellent.
Nice to be back. Thank you very much.
Great Pittsburgh connections, as always.
Yep.
Kennywood, all of that. Want to get right to questions or some stories?
My first personal appearance at 10 years old was at Kennywood Park.
That's right.
Yeah, it's true. I was on a press junket for a TV series called Circus Boy, and I had a pet elephant, and we brought the elephant cross country and me, and I opened for the elephant. That was my first gig, opening for an elephant. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Kennywood Park.
Well, before we get into the first question, Mickey has a new album out called Dolenz Sings Nesmith.
Oh, that's right.
And I believe it is actually sold out on Amazon.
Yeah, I bought all the copies.
There you go. And he's got them at his table.
And I have them in the trunk of my car, if anybody's interested.
So we're going to get to questions in a little bit.
Sure.
But I just have something interesting, actually, to go with the album. Hearing a lot of Mike's songs, did you guys ever, play around with them in between, takes with the TV show? I mean, did you actually do a lot of his music outside of the Monkees?
Well, Mike was the only one in the early days. He was the only one actually writing songs. So when they cast us into the show, and we started rehearsing for the upcoming tour, and recording and whatever, we tended to rehearse with his songs because he was the only one really writing a lot of stuff. And so right from the get-go, Mike and I tended to, bond with the music. He was from Dallas, Texas. My mom was from Austin, Texas. And so we had that connection. I was brought up on Tennessee Ernie Ford and, Sons of the Pioneers. And so I had that country western flavor in the house. And, of course, Nez did. And so when we started singing together, we sort of naturally fell into I call it the Everly Monkees. And it was that typical country harmony. It's a third above the melody kind of thing. And we just kind of fell into it and forever and to this day. And so there was that kind of connection always. And then there was also the comedy. Nez and I both had same sensibilities in comedy, like Monty Python and Peter Cook and Dudley Moore and stuff like that. So the album came about. I had a very... hang on one sec. That's vodka.
Sorry, didn't tell you.
The album came about many years ago, decades ago. A very dear friend of mine, my best friend probably at the time, was a singer-songwriter called Harry Nilsson.
Oh, yeah.
And, Yep. And he recorded an album in the early 70s called Nilsson Sings Newman, the songs of Randy Newman, who I was also a big fan of. And I just thought it was a cool idea. I was there at the time, and, I just thought, well, fast forward decades, and I was in rehearsals with Nez and Peter Tork, actually, after David passed, and I said to Nez, I'd like to do a song like Harry did with Newman. I'd like to do Dolenz Sings Newman. And he was like, I think that's a good idea, Mick. I'll write some songs. And then it went on the back burner for a while. We were on tour, and then I did a show, I think, on Broadway, whatever, and more touring. And then a couple of years ago, I guess, 7A Records, this company in England, said, you want to do anything original, you know, a new album? And I said, well, I like the idea of Dolenz Sings Nesmith, and there we are. And I'm very proud of it. So is Nez. You know, it's wonderful, wonderful songs. All of the songs are written by Michael Nesmith, and I'm quite proud of it. If you get a chance, you know, check it out.
Great.
But you can't get it on Amazon.
It's all gone.
No, I think you can now.
Nice. How about we take some questions? Is that good? All right. Raise your hand.
I'll get this guy first.
All right. You go do that. I'll head over here.
Hi. Speaking of vodka and Harry Nilsson, I was wondering, do you have any like stories about the Hollywood vampires? Since you, Ringo, and Alice Cooper are pretty much the only ones left. I was like, do you have any good good Hollywood vampire stories?
I'm told I had a great time. No, I do. You know, there's a little bit of an urban myth about it. It started out as Alice and I putting together a charity softball team. We Alice's idea, and we would play softball on the weekends and raise money for different charities. We'd play against other record companies or the fire department or the police department or something, and raise money and give it to the local charities. And then we would go to the Rainbow Bar and Grill and, yeah, party and drink and have pizza. But it started out as a softball team. Alice was very good. He pitched. Peter Tork was the best baseball player we had by far. He played. I think he played left field, if I'm not mistaken, or shortstop. And I played first base usually. And we would play on the weekend and then, you know, go have pizza and beer. It was great. And if you ever see a photo, there's not many, but if you see photos of us in our little shirts, they're baseball shirts. And that's what it was a softball team.
Okay, question right over here on this side.
Welcome to Pittsburgh, Mickey, first of all. Just wanted to ask kind of like a two-part question. The first one is, you mentioned Harry Nilsson. What other musicians or performers did you enjoy listening to when you all started with the Monkees? And then more to now, what performers do you enjoy or listen to now?
Well, before the Monkees, I had other cover bands like Mickey and the One-Nighters, because it was one night. But it was cover tunes. But my propensity was towards rock and roll. You know, my heroes, the people I listened to before the Monkees even were Little Richard, Fats Domino, Jerry Lee Lewis, Johnny Mathis, Sam Cooke, you know, that kind of, you know, rock and roll. And my audition piece for the Monkees was Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. So that's kind of where I was going as a musical artist. And during and after the Monkees, really, I never really, and to this day, if I listen to music in the morning, it's maybe classical guitar, Segovia, because that was my first instrument, was classical guitar as a kid. And then, you know, Ella Fitzgerald, Frank Sinatra, that kind of stuff, you know, in the afternoon at wine time. You know, that's what I listen to, you know, at the end of the day. Yeah.
All right, we've got a question for you right over here to your left.
Hi, Mickey. As a student of sociology and psychology, I'm fascinated with this whole new development of fame. It's a relatively new concept. development. And I just wondered if you could speak to what happens, when you guys hit in '66, you went into the stratosphere. I just wondered, could you speak to what fame does when a young person hits it really big when they're young?
Oh, great question. Yeah. Well, it's always existed. I mean, these days with social media, of course, it's compounded. But I was a child star at 10, and I had my degree of fame. Nothing like you see today with social media. The fame part at the onset is not the problem. It's the post fame that where people can tend to have problems, and because it's tough enough, say, going through puberty at any age, but when you're like 10 years old and you're a child star and you're famous and everybody loves you, and then 2 years later you're a has-been, and it's that can be and tends to be what is devastating, and unless you've had some really solid parenting and guidance, that's the problem. It's kind of the post-fame thing when you aren't, why doesn't anybody love me anymore? And that's where we see my good friend Paul Peterson from the Donna Reed started a wonderful organization trying to tend to young child stars who, ended up not knowing what to do, where to go, and that maybe they didn't have good parenting. I was fortunate. I was blessed. My parents were pretty down to earth. I never grew up in that kind of environment, a showbiz kind of eyes and teeth, honey, eyes and teeth, I grew up in a pretty stable, environment, home environment. And after Circus Boy, they took me out of the business entirely, which was very smart. And I went back to school and ended up going to college, studying to be an architect. And I was in college doing architecture when the Monkee auditions came around, interviews. I was going to be an architect and fall back on showbiz if I couldn't make it as an architect.
We got a question for you right here.
You're next.
So you were my very first heartthrob. I was 4 years old. I watched your show faithfully every single episode. I mean, my little heart would beat, okay? And so I would sit on the edge of my seat when somebody was chasing the monkeys or getting you guys into really tough spots. Did you guys do your own stunts, or did you have stunt doubles when you were trying to get away and solve these mysteries and stuff?
I couldn't quite hear all that question. What was it?
You were her heartthrob when she was 4. No, did the monkeys have any stunt doubles when you were being chased by villains or getting into scrapes?
Oh, very, very seldom, because most of the stuff was not, life-threatening. It wasn't, John Wick kind of stuff. No, very seldom. There were a couple of occasions when the producers deemed that it was a little bit too dangerous. But I had, stunt doubles in Circus Boy for the same reason. When the producers said, we can't take a chance that the star, the lead, gets hurt. And that's usually when you do that is only when it's potentially so dangerous that somebody could get hurt. But very seldom in the silly romps and the stuff running around and running around backwards at double speed. That was really hard to do because they didn't have that trick in the camera at that time. You had to really run around backwards very fast. It was very difficult. We trained for that. Yeah.
A question on this side of the room, right here.
Do you ever get sick and tired of talking about the Monkees, or is that like? Do you have like very fond memories of that period in your life and career that you're more than happy to talk about it with younger generations, like you wear it like a badge of honor?
I totally get sick and tired of it.
There, you happy?
You know, that's a good question, actually, because it can get redundant, you know, telling the same stories over and over. But, you know, over the years, if it's amongst people that appreciate, you know, really appreciate it, and it's not just lip service, then no, I don't mind. I don't mind at all. I don't mind something like this where everybody has done their homework, presumably. The time when I do when it does bother me is when I'll be interviewed by someone and they'll say, well, when the group, you know, when you had the group and they got the television show, what was that like? And I'm like, so then I have to explain the whole genesis, you know, of the Monkees, you know, phenomena, whatever you want to call it. But no, basically, I don't mind, you know, when people like appreciate it and stuff like that.
And a question right over on the same side.
Hi, Mickey. First, I do have very fond memories of the Monkees. I was 4 years old when it first aired, and I always wondered whose idea was it that came up with the concept of the Monkees and you know, the backstory.
Sure. Well, briefly, I mean, you can get this on Wikipedia, so I'll be brief. It was a television show, a sitcom, created by Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider.
Yep.
Bob Rafelson went on to become obviously a huge film director. Bob Rafelson, Bert Schneider. The pilot was written by Paul Mazursky and Larry Tucker, and it was a pilot developed by Screen Gems Television in 1965. Jackie Cooper, the actor, was the head of the television company at the time. There were 3 or 4 other, at least, music shows that were being pitched at the time. I was up for all of them. There was one show like Peter, Paul, and Mary, kind of a folk group, that was called The Happeners. It actually went to pilot, that one. I didn't get that one, obviously. There was another one like a Beach Boys surfing group music show. There was another one like a big Mighty Wind, you know, the big folk family thing with 30, you know, people. That didn't go to pilot. Couple of others. And so it was in the air to do a music show because pop music and rock and roll and, of course, the Beatles, it was all huge. And the Monkees was one of them. And I went up for it. I went for my audition, interview, and then another one, and then another audition and interview, and then musical. You had to be able to sing and play to get in through the auditions. It was extensive, much more than a normal television series, because usually you just read a few lines from a script and maybe have a screen test. But this was a little quite more elaborate. And eventually, my agent said, you got the pilot. I didn't even quit school. I was in college doing architecture, and I knew that pilots don't usually sell most of the time. So I just stayed in school. I took a couple of weeks out to do the pilot, and then when it did sell, I quit school. And the rest is history.
Got a question for you straight ahead here.
So I do remember your show, but I only remember watching the intro, We Are the Monkees, and then I turned it off because, I don't know, I was little and Godzilla was probably on. But I always heard, maybe you can finally answer, I always heard that that the Monkees were supposed to be a play off of the Beatles, as if it was kind of not a joke, but it was supposed to be not Beatles, but the same thing. Was that true, or is that just a rumor?
What's the question? I'm sorry.
Well, okay, so the question is, the Monkees, I understand, were supposed to be like a joke to the Beatles.
Oh, no, that's not true. The Monkees was a television show, not a group. It was a television show about a group, imaginary group that actually didn't exist except on the set. But it was about a group that wanted to be the Beatles. And that was what the show was about. We had a poster of the Beatles on the wall. We'd throw darts at it. It was this group that lived in this beach house in Malibu, which does beg the question of how we could afford a Malibu beach house when we never got any work. But that was what the show was about. It was the struggle for success. We never made it on the television show, if you've ever watched it, ever. But the Monkees were always trying to get a record deal, trying to be famous, trying to get a hit, and that's what I think had a lot to do with why it was so endeared by all the kids around the U.S. and the world that were doing the same thing in their basements, in their garages, in their bedrooms, playing and trying to be the Beatles or whoever. Mm-hmm. That's what the show was about. Mm-hmm. And like I say, that's what I think had a lot to do with the success. But we never made it on the show. It was that struggle for success that drove the machine. Of course, eventually when we went on the road and released the records and did the albums and all that, like Michael Nesmith often has said, it was like Pinocchio becoming a real little boy.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we were out there, like in front of 15, 20,000 people performing just by ourselves, just playing. It's an interesting story. It hasn't happened often. The closest thing recently that I can think of is something like Glee. You know that show? Mm-hmm. Where it's a show about an imaginary glee club in a high school, I think. But they actually can do it all. They can sing, they can dance, they can act. They went on the road, I think, and performed live, the cast. If you think of the Monkees as a cast of a musical, it makes a whole lot more sense.
On the TV show, you had a lot of really great guest stars. One in particular I really got a kick out of when Hans Conried was on the show. You seemed to really frazzle him. Hans Conried.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was, they had encouraged us to be very spontaneous and improvisational. We took improv classes because they wanted that feeling of improv, which was really unheard of at the time in television or movies. You didn't improv. You read your lines. You learned your lines. You came in, you did your scene, you went home. But they had encouraged us to have that 60s, improv kind of spontaneous feeling. Jim Frawley, who ended up directing a lot of the episodes and won Emmys for it, he had come out of Second City with Mike Nichols and Elaine May. And very early on in the series, we would have these improv classes. So they encouraged us to have this spontaneity, totally off-the-wall stuff. And of course, once you start once you start that going, it's you can't just shut it off necessarily. And there were times when we would literally be bouncing off the walls on the set, and they'd have to stop production for a couple hours because we were just nuts. And one of those times was when Hans Conried, a wonderful, wonderful actor, came on the show. But he obviously was old school and learned his lines and came on, and we were just like 4 sheets to the wind, just nuts. And at one point, I think it's on tape. He says, "God, I hate these fucking kids."
Right. Yeah.
I felt so bad about that because I was a big fan of Hans Conried. But they encouraged it, But at times it's like kind of a nuclear fission reaction. You got to keep a lid on it, or it'll blow. But if you put too tight a lid on it, it burns, it goes out, and nothing happens. So it's kind of maintaining this balance like in a pressure cooker. And that's what it was like filming that show. It was pretty crazy.
All right, we got a question for you right here in the second row.
Does the Monkey Mobile still exist, and do you know where it's at?
Well, now there's a couple. Well, there always was two. And they got trashed. One caught on fire. They were designed by a guy named Dean Jeffries in Los Angeles. And one was for the show to drive on the around in the show, and the other was going to be a dragster, like a top fuel dragster. That never happened, but the I don't know what happened right after the Monkees, where they went. I had nothing to do with it myself. They're pretty cool cars. They were designed nicely. Eventually, George Barris, the famous car guy, claimed that he had designed it, which is not true. And I called him on it a number of times. George, that is a lie. But he restored the one that got burnt. He restored it. One of them ended up, I heard, in Jamaica, driving people from the hotel to the airport, which I thought was kind of appropriate. And but now somebody bought one of them in the Midwest. I think others have made duplicate, versions that aren't the original. So, yeah.
I think we got time for one or two more questions.
All right, well, we got a question right here.
I read recently that possibly you auditioned for Happy Days for the role of Fonzie. I didn't know if that was true, and I was wondering if it was true, what was that like, and what would have made you want to be in a show that had nothing to do with music?
Well, to answer your last question first, I was an actor, essentially, long before I was a musician. I mean, I played guitar, but I was an actor. I approached the Monkees show as an actor, playing the part of a wacky drummer. But I could play, I could read music. So I have always approached it as that, as an entertainer, like somebody doing a musical where you sing. I don't know what you would call that person, an entertainer or an actor, singer, or singer-actor. But that's always how I approached it. So after the Monkees, I'd already had a series when I was a kid, just as an actor, and then the Monkees came along, and I was playing the part of this wacky drummer, singer, actor, comedian. After the Monkees, I said to my agent, "Get me another job." And the casting for Happy Days came up as a mid-season replacement. Some show got canceled, and it was a mid-season replacement, so it was really fast, had to be cast. And I went up for it, and as Fonz, and I think pretty sure it was down to me and Henry. right down to the wire, because I remember going for the callback to the audition. I don't remember him specifically. Years later we became good friends, and he remembered going to the callback, and I was there, and he says, I saw Mickey Dolenz there, and I thought, I'll never get this. Yeah. But thank goodness he did, because he was the Fonz and always will be. He was wonderful.
Okay, well, we'll make this one the last question.
And you're going to be headed back to your table, am I correct? To sign?
Going right back now.
And you'll have copies of your new album there?
In the trunk of my car.
You heard it right here.
I'm going to bring them out.
Dolenz sings Nesmith.
We'll let this be the last question then.
Mickey, hi. I've had many great memories over the years of watching the Monkees, reruns with my brothers, sneaking out of school and driving to Jersey to see you perform live in a big open-air coliseum. What, as a performer, have you preferred over the years? That big electric feeling of that large concert venue, or something small and more intimate?
Good question. To me personally, I can only speak for myself. It doesn't really make any difference, because for me on stage, especially now that I don't have great eyesight, I can't see shit. And I have earbuds doing the monitoring of the sound of the band, but I can't see in a normal concert situation past the first row or so, because it's dark, and so it doesn't matter if there's 100 or 10,000. It's kind of all the same in that sense. It doesn't really matter the size of the venues, because I can't see it. I can't tell, and it never has really bothered me. I used to, when I started doing solo gigs, I would turn around and face the band until my manager said, you really should play out to the audience, because I just like to play with the band, just rock and roll.
Well, there you have it, and you guys know what to do. How about an electric standing ovation for the one and only Mickey Dolenz? Absolutely such an amazing pleasure to have you back. You guys can do better than that.
Hi, this is Aaron Ashmore, and you are watching Fandom Spotlight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe like now. Oh, and have fun and follow your fandom.